The text that ended my 5-year marriage arrived at exactly 2:14 on a Tuesday afternoon, while my husband, Mark, was sitting right across from me at our kitchen island. The problem wasn't just what the message said. The real devastation lay in the realization of who he thought he was sending it to. We had been sitting in the quiet warmth of our home, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the space between us as we both worked from our laptops. Mark had his phone resting face up on the polished quartz counter next to his coffee mug. When the screen lit up with a brief vibration, my eyes naturally drifted toward it. Because our digital accounts were synced to the same home network, a localized preview banner popped up before his privacy settings could mask it. The message read, "The coast is clear. She thinks I'm at the office late tonight. Meet me at our spot by 7:30. Don't wear the blue dress, it reminds me too much of her." I froze, the cup of tea halfway to my lips suddenly feeling like lead. I looked up at Mark. He hadn't noticed that I saw it. In fact, he was calmly typing away on his computer, his expression entirely neutral. A second later, his hand reached out, swiped the phone off the counter, and his thumb moved rapidly across the screen. He was deleting it, but he didn't look at me. He didn't panic. He just kept his head down, his breathing steady, entirely unaware that the foundation of our entire existence had just dissolved in a span of 3 seconds. The immediate temptation in a moment like that is to scream, to knock the coffee mug off the counter, to demand he hand over the device and explain why a piece of my own identity, a blue dress he had bought me for our 3rd anniversary, was being used as a reference point for another woman. But something cold and sharp took over my chest. I didn't say a word. I set my tea down without making a sound, closed my laptop, and walked out of the kitchen. To understand why I didn't confront him right then, you have to understand the man Mark had slowly become over the previous 18 months. We weren't a couple that fought loudly. Instead, Mark's control was architectural. He built high, invisible walls around himself, piece by piece, until I was completely locked out of his inner world, while still sharing his bed. He was an assistant principal at a local charter school, a man whose entire professional identity was built on order, discipline, and a calm, unshakable authority. At home, that authority manifested as a subtle, pervasive dismissiveness. If I questioned why our joint savings account seemed to fluctuate by a few $100s every month, he would look at me with a mild, patronizing smile and say, "Chloe, sweetie, I'm handling the investment transfers. You've always been so sensitive about budget stress. Just let me take care of it." He made me feel like the irrational one. He made me doubt my own eyes, my own memory, and my own value. But now, I had an anchor. I had a single, undeniable piece of reality that his manipulation could not erase. At 6:30 that evening, Mark stood in front of our hallway mirror, adjusting the collar of his charcoal jacket. He looked exactly like the man I had married, dependable, handsome, completely ordinary. "The district budget review is going to run incredibly late tonight, Chloe," he said, his eyes meeting mine through the glass reflection. "Don't wait up for me. Eat some dinner, get some rest." "I'm fine," I replied, keeping my voice perfectly flat. "Good luck with the review." "Thanks. I'll text you when I'm leaving," he said, leaning down to press a quick, dry kiss against my cheek. The garage door rumbled open, his car backed out into the twilight, and the house fell into an absolute, suffocating silence. It was currently 6:45 p.m. I had exactly 45 minutes until he was supposed to meet someone at our spot. The phrase lingered in my mind, burning a hole through my thoughts. Our spot. Mark and I only had one place we called that. It was an old, dimly lit bistro called The Foundry on the north side of the city, the exact place where we had our very first date 6 years ago. The thought of him taking another woman there felt like a physical violation. I didn't follow him. I didn't get into my car and drive to the restaurant to make a scene. Instead, I walked up the stairs to his home office. Mark was meticulous, but his greatest weakness was his own arrogance. He truly believed I was too simple, too trusting, to ever look beneath the surface of our life. Because of that, he had left his old tablet charging on his secondary desk. It was an older model, one he rarely used anymore, but it was still connected to his primary cloud profile. My hands were shaking as I woke the screen. I bypassed the lock screen using his standard PIN and went straight to the native navigation app, the one synced to his car's digital dashboard. I looked at the location history. What I found wasn't a sudden recent deviation. It was a map of a completely parallel life. For the past 9 months, his car stopped at a residential address in a quiet neighborhood, 20 minutes east of our house every single Tuesday, and Thursday afternoon between 3 and 6 p.m. I typed the residential address into a public property directory on my laptop. The house belonged to a woman named Clara Harrison. The name sent a chill straight down my spine. Clara wasn't some stranger. She was my high school classmate, a woman who had recently moved back to the area and had actually attended our housewarming party 2 years ago. She had sat at our dinner table, complimented our home, and smiled warmly at me while subtly studying the layout of my life. I sat at his desk until 9:30 p.m., watching his cloud-synced text logs update in near real time. At 9:14 p.m., a single text transaction registered from his phone to Clara's number. A minute later, my own phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from Mark. "Hey honey, just wrapped up this nightmare of a budget meeting. Heading home now. Love you." When Mark walked through the front door, 20 minutes later, he found me sitting on the living room sofa with a book open in my lap. He looked exhausted, rubbing the back of his neck. "The board is cutting our department funding," he sighed, dropping his leather briefcase onto the armchair. "It's going to be a brutal couple of months, Chloe. I might have to spend even more time at the district office over the next few weeks." "That's fine," I said, finally looking up and offering him a small, polite smile. "Do what you need to do, Mark." As he walked upstairs to take a shower, I stepped over to the armchair and quietly opened his briefcase. Inside, nestled between school budget spreadsheets, was a small, physical bank ledger. Mark was old-fashioned about keeping track of his extra cash. I flipped it open. The entries listed a series of cash withdrawals, ranging from $300 to $500 every single month, spanning back over a year. Next to each withdrawal was a single handwritten initial, C, but it was the entry from 3 weeks ago that made my heart stop completely. It was a cashier's check reference number for $5,000, noted as Clara apartment deposit. $5,000 was the exact amount we had allegedly lost from our shared high-yield savings account last month due to what Mark had called a banking error. He had spent hours pretending to argue with customer service representatives on the phone while I sat in the living room, worrying about our emergency fund. He hadn't lost the money. He had paid the security deposit and first month's rent on a luxury apartment for his mistress. I took out the phone, snapped a perfectly clear photograph of the ledger page, zipped the briefcase back up exactly as it had been, and walked back to the sofa. Over the next 2 weeks, I didn't stop cooking dinner, and I didn't change my routine by a single hour. I let him believe his life was completely secure. But then, I found something that made the affair look small. I had been digging deeper into our shared digital tax portal, looking for where else our money might have gone. When I pulled up our home's recent refinancing documents, my jaw went slack. Mark had quietly applied for a personal loan using our home equity as collateral. My signature was on the bottom of the page, a clumsy forgery that he had submitted online. He had pulled $60,000 out of our house, but it wasn't the money that broke me. It was what I found pinned to his digital calendar on his school work profile. Mark wasn't planning a life with Clara. He wasn't pulling equity from our home to build a future with her. He had secretly accepted a high-paying principal position at a private academy. 3 states away, the contract was signed. His start date was in exactly 1 month. I found his packing manifests and a lease for a condo in his name only. He had opened a brand new private bank account solely under his name, using Clara's apartment address as the billing destination to keep the paper trail away from our house. He was funneling the $60,000 of stolen equity into that account. He was planning to pack up his car while I was at work, drive across the country, and completely vanish from my life, leaving me with a heavily leveraged house and a mountain of debt I couldn't afford on. My salary alone, and Clara? She thought she was winning. In his deleted email trash bin, I found messages from her asking when he was finally going to leave me so they could move into a house together. Mark had replied, "Soon, babe. I'm just getting the final pieces of the puzzle together. Trust me." He was using Clara's apartment as a physical shield to hide his mail, letting her believe they were building a life, while secretly planning to ghost both of us. He was going to leave her holding the lease on an apartment she couldn't afford, while he started fresh with a massive pocket of cash 3 states away. The sheer layers of betrayal were dizzying. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I didn't confront him at home. Mark had laid out his entire timeline perfectly for me. All I had to do was step back and let him trip over his own trap. The opportunity arrived on a Friday evening. Mark came home looking incredibly pleased with himself, whistling softly as he set his briefcase down. "Chloe, sweetie," he said, walking into the kitchen. "The school board is hosting an end-of-the-year dinner tonight at the Foundry. It's a casual thing, but Clara Harrison is actually going to be there as a community liaison. I think it would be great if you came along. It's been a while since we went out. He wanted me there. He wanted the perfect cover story. He wanted the picture-image of his supportive wife standing next to him, completely blind to the fact that his moving truck was already booked. "I'd love to go," I said, offering him a perfectly calm, serene smile. "Let me go change into my dress." I went upstairs, walked to the back of the closet, and pulled out the dress he had bought me for our 3rd anniversary. The vibrant, deep royal blue fabric felt cool against my skin. When I walked downstairs, Mark stopped in his tracks, his eyes widening slightly as he looked at the dress, a brief, uncomfortable flicker of memory crossing his face before he masked it with a tight smile. "You look beautiful, Chloe," he stammered. The atmosphere inside the foundry was loud and elegant. We were directed to a private alcove booth near the back of the restaurant. Clara was already sitting there, wearing a beautiful cream-colored silk blouse. When she saw me walk in wearing the exact blue dress Mark had specifically forbidden her from replicating, her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Chloe, it's so wonderful to see you," Clara said, leaning forward to press her cheek against mine. "You look absolutely stunning in that blue." "Thank you, Clara," I said, taking my seat directly across from her. "It's a very special dress. Mark bought it for me before he started keeping secrets." The table went completely dead silent. Mark chuckled nervously, reaching out to pat my hand. "Chloe, sweetie, what are you talking about? You're making jokes in front of our guests." I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my purse, pulled out a stack of neatly folded papers, and laid them flat on the center of the white tablecloth, right between their wine glasses. On the top of the stack was the online loan application with my forged signature, highlighted in yellow. Directly beneath it was the signed employment contract for his new job 3 states away, and his single-occupancy condo lease. Mark leaned forward, his face draining of color so fast he looked almost translucent under the dim restaurant chandeliers. His hand froze over his water glass. Clara tilted her head, her eyes scanning the documents until they landed on the new job contract and the solo lease. "What is this?" Clara whispered, her voice dropping all its warmth, her eyes shifting rapidly between Mark and the papers. "Mark, what is this address? Why is this lease only in your name?" "Because he's leaving, Clara," I said, my voice completely level, carrying a quiet, unshakable authority. "But he's not taking you with him. He used your apartment address to hide the billing statements for a $60,000 fraudulent loan he took, out against my house. He's leaving in 2 weeks, and he's leaving both of us with nothing." Clara stood up so fast, her chair scraped violently against the hardwood floor. She stared at Mark, her face contorting with pure rage. "You told me the money in that account was our savings, for a down payment. You told me you were waiting for the divorce to settle. You used my apartment to hide your mail." "Clara, shut up, keep your voice down," Mark hissed, his polished demeanor completely shattering as he looked around the crowded restaurant in a panic. He turned to me, his hands shaking as he tried to reach for my arm. "Chloe, please, this is a massive misunderstanding. Let's go to the car. I can explain everything." "There's nothing to explain, Mark," I said, sliding the papers slightly closer to him. "I'm not here to negotiate, and I'm not here to scream. I've already prepared the full evidence package with my attorney. The home equity forgery, the secret accounts, all of it." Mark tried to swallow, his jaw tightening as he looked at the booth table. "You can't prove a thing in a restaurant booth, Chloe. We'll let the courts sort this out." "We could," I replied softly, leaning forward just enough so only he could hear the ice in my voice. "But by Monday morning, your school board will know exactly what you've done. And I'm sure the Academy 3 states away would love to see a certified copy of a bank fraud investigation attached to their new principal's background check before his first day." The realization hit him like a physical blow. The absolute stillness that followed was suffocating. Clara looked at him with pure, unadulterated venom, snatched her purse off the table, and walked out of the restaurant without a single word, leaving him completely isolated in the booth. Mark sat there for a long time, staring at the forged signature highlighted in yellow. He didn't sign anything right then, he couldn't. But the psychological leverage was absolute. He knew that the life he had spent 15 years building was entirely dependent on my silence over the next 48 hours. When he finally called my attorney on Sunday evening, his voice was entirely hollowed out. He voluntarily agreed to a full, uncontested settlement. He assigned over his equity in the house, transferred the $60,000 back from his private account to clear the fraudulent loan, and accepted a swift, quiet dissolution of the marriage, just to keep the evidence from reaching the school board. He didn't do it because he was generous. He did it because he was terrified. 6 months have passed since that night at the foundry, and the final fallout has completely settled. Because Clara realized she had been used as a financial shield, she wanted nothing to do with him. She broke off all contact immediately and threatened to report him to the police for using her address for fraudulent mail unless he paid her, breaking lease fees. Mark had no choice but to comply, draining what little remaining personal savings he had left. The school board eventually found out about his behavior anyway, through the community grapevine, and his contract for the new position out of state was quietly rescinded due to a conduct clause. He was forced to take a low-paying administrative consulting job across the state, living in a cramped studio apartment entirely broke. I didn't celebrate his destruction. The house is completely mine now, the debt has been entirely paid off by the funds he returned, and the rooms don't feel lonely anymore. Last weekend, I went to a dinner party with some old friends. Before I left the house, I walked to the back of the closet, reached past the heavy winter coats, and pulled out the vibrant royal blue dress. I put it on, zipped it up, and looked at myself in the hallway mirror. I didn't feel a single twinge of sadness. I didn't think about Mark, and I didn't think about the message that had broken my life apart 6 months ago. I wore it because it fit perfectly, and because for the first time in years, the woman standing in it belonged entirely to herself. The man I married turned out to be a shadow, but in his arrogance, he forgot that shadows can only exist when you keep the light turned away. If this story reminded you that strategic restraint is more powerful than loud confrontation, and that true closure belongs to you alone, please leave a like on this video. It truly helps our community grow. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another confession of quiet justice. Thank you for listening to Stories Reads tonight. Keep your circle honest, and I will see you in the next account.